Hello everyone, my name is Tano Trevino, calling in from TAMIU's Graduate Students Advanced Research and Curriculum section, currently in the Graduate Student Academic Success Center. And today we're going to be talking about quotes, when and how to use them in your academic writing. This presentation will cover direct quotes, introductory phrases, explications, integrating quotes, block quotes, quote punctuations, and many other things that involve quotes such as paraphrasing and summarizing. This presentation was developed by Franco Zamora, a writing consultant for the Advanced Research and Curriculum section, and this presentation is for APA 7th edition and MLA 8th edition. Let's go ahead and dive into direct quotes, the basics. Now, the first type of quote that you might use is the exact words or the exact sentence that was used in the text that you're referencing. Now, in order to do that, of course, you need to put those words and phrases into quotation marks. But to give it proper citation, you need to mention the author and the year that it was published. Take a look at this example. As you can see, first the writer mentions the name of the author and then the year, followed by the quote. Because this quote has introduced the author at the beginning of the sentence, there's no need to cite a source at the end of the sentence. This is the simplest way you can quote text. Another way to introduce a quote is with an introductory phrase. Now, this is usually a phrase or a sentence that comes before the direct quote, and then it negates the need to put a citation directly before the quote, and instead you can put it afterwards. Here's an example of what this looks like. As you can see on the first sentence, they do mention the text that they're citing as well as the year. And then in the following sentence, they go on to just reference the author as she. But be sure to also include that quotation at the end. And if you're ever unsure on whether or not to quote something, just go ahead and put the quote in, just to be safe. When an author uses a quote from another source of text, they'll tend to unpack exactly what they said and kind of give a more explanation as to why they're using that quote. As you can tell from this example right here, they went ahead and introduced the quote, gave the quote with the proper citation, and then just went on to explain it a little bit further. This just demonstrates that you have a lot of knowledge based on this quote and you know how to use it in your text. One thing to avoid, standalone quotes. When you have your quote, it's a good quote from the source that you trust, and you just drop it in there without an introductory statement. This might make the reader a little bit more confused, especially if there's no context. This is why it's important to make sure that you do have that sort of flow when you're using a quote, and try to avoid having the reader, try to look for answers that aren't there. Now we'll get into an integrated quote. This is one of the more stylistically desirable types of quotes that authors might use in their work. So this is when you blend in a direct quote from somebody else and you implement it in your text while giving proper citation. And the way to do that is to kind of blend your words with theirs. As you can see from this example, the author starts writing, gives a direct quote, continues writing, gives another direct quote from the same source, and then is able to just give the author and the year by the end of this section. This can help an author by only highlighting the most important parts of the quote while still being able to convey that message through paraphrasing or any other mechanisms that they use to relay the same message. Up next, we have long quotes or block quotes. So in MLA 8, that's usually quotes that are more than 4 lines, or in APA, it's more than 40 words. They need to be a separate quote on their own that's indented a half inch more than the rest of the body. So for these type of quotes, they don't need exactly quotation marks, but they do need that proper citation at the end. So this is an example of what that looks like. So as you can see, this longer quote is indented on the left side. There's no quotation marks anywhere, but they do have that in-text citation at the end. So that way when the text continues, it's a smooth transition from the paragraph above. And next we're going into quote punctuations. When quotes are introduced as part of a sentence after an independent clause, a comma or a colon is used to offset them. The first letter of the quotation goes capitalized as if it was the start of a new sentence. But for short quotes, in-text citation is placed in parentheses after the quotation marks, and a period is placed at the end. Let me explain further. Here in this example, as you can see, they use a comma and a colon in both of these different instances. It all just depends on how you decide to phrase your quote or introduce your quote as you're stating it. But be sure you do place that in-text citation after each quote. And if you decide to use your quote within your sentence as in integrated with your sentence, then certain different rules apply. If it goes with the flow of your sentence and you want to use that quotation, no extra punctuation is needed unless it is explicitly needed for grammatical purposes. As you can see from the second line in this example, a comma was added there for grammatical congruency. And last but not least, questions and exclamation points. If they're part of the quote themselves, then they go within the quotation marks. However, if the entire sentence that the author is writing is a question that integrates a quote, then the punctuation must go after the quote and after the citation. As you can see from this example here, in the first sentence, the quote itself had an exclamation point. Therefore, the sentence itself does not need one. However, in the second line, as you can see, the entire sentence is a question. Therefore, the punctuation would not go inside of that quote. And up next, we have ellipses, brackets, and shortened quotes. Each one of these is used differently in your direct quotes depending on how you decide to structure your paper or in what way that you're using them. So in the first example here, we can see that an ellipsis is used to omit certain text, whether because it's not relevant to what your argument is, or for any other reason that you decide to omit a certain section of that quote. This is just to convey to the reader that there is some text missing in the full quote. For brackets, these are often used for any changes or additions to the text that might make it more clear as to what exactly the original author was talking about. So in this quote here, in this example here, you can see that they added brackets in order to emphasize that this is what the original author had intended. Some other errors also use brackets. In this case, put in brackets SIC, which will indicate to the reader that this is something that is grammatically incorrect and that they shouldn't be confused by this quote because of it. Next off, we have quotes within quotes. This is when your secondary sources have a quote that's referencing another piece of material. So when you're doing this in APA, during the in-text citation, you need to mention as cited in blank. And in MLA, it's QDT and whatever that secondary source is. Some other instances, if there's a quote within a quote that you're using, instead of using quotation marks, twice, what you can do is the quote that's inside of that quote just employs apostrophes instead of quotation marks. And also, lastly, if there's an in-block quote for more than 40 words in APA, then you would, just use regular quotation marks since that type of quote doesn't use quotation marks at all. Something commonly used in academic texts is paraphrasing. This is when they get certain material from a different source and they implement it in their text without direct quotation. That doesn't mean that they don't have to cite. They actually cite in the exact same way, and they'll even use the same type of words and the same type of sentences, but not verbatim what is being discussed in the original text. Now, be sure to always include proper citation when you do this. Again, this is one of the more important parts when using paraphrasing to avoid any, suspicions of plagiarism. As you can see from this example, there's no direct quotes, no quotation marks used, but there is proper citation for each author that is mentioned. And last but not least, we have the summary quotation. Now, a summary condenses all of the major points or the major chapters of a certain text or a certain book into a few sentences or even one sentence. So an entire book or a paper can be summarized in just a few phrases. Now, citation is still required for these outside texts, even though you're just summarizing them in your own words. Here in this example, you can see them introduce the text before then explicitly stating what the text entails and giving proper citation by the end of their summary. And there you go. As you can tell, there's a variety of different ways in which you can incorporate your sources into your text by using all of these different techniques. So be sure to practice and experiment. A skilled writer uses a variety of different reference techniques depending on the situation and what type of writing that they're going to end up doing. But be sure to practice. Be sure to consult with your instructors, your institutions, different organizations, and especially the Graduate Student Academic Success Center, or ARC. It all depends on the most up-to-date styles and which style is best for your writing. Thank you all for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. And if you would like to see this PowerPoint in more detail, feel free to go to tamiu.edu/c/arc. There you can find the PowerPoint, and you can also schedule an appointment with one of our writing consultants. That's tamiu.edu/c/arc. We'll see you soon.